I'd like to call to order the Plan and Zone Commission meeting of today, July 2nd, 2018. I would like to remind everybody in the audience to please turn off your cell phones. If you get a voicemail, it could end up on our audio recording. I'd also like to ask the audience to please refrain from any outbursts, any comments, any applause. Please be respectful of everybody in attendance. Please, if you step up to the podium, identify yourself along with your address. Please direct any questions to the commission and try to keep your comments less than 3 to 5 minutes, please. We have a lot of people here tonight. We have a lot on the agenda. I will also say that if your case is completed, you can leave early, but please refrain from talking till you get out in the hallway. We have a lot, like I said, a lot to discuss tonight. Tonight we do not have a public hearing, so we'll move on to our regular meeting. Roll call, please.
Connell?
Present.
Hepner?
Here.
Ingram?
Present.
Johnson?
Here.
Kelling?
Here.
Lammers?
Present.
Manus? Med?
Here.
Quinn?
Here.
Reinhardt?
Here.
Tallman here. We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Tallman. Report of City Council activity.
Nothing new to report.
Thank you. Secretary's report.
Move the report.
Second.
All in favor of the Secretary's report as printed, signify by aye. Opposed? It is approved. Report of the Comp Plan Committee. Matt?
Matt Flynn, Community Planning. Just wanted to give a quick plug. We've been talking about the zoning ordinance update. It's getting real, if you will. Pretty soon, hopefully, you will see all over town posters that I'm showing up here that will advertise our open houses that will be between August 1st and 3rd. I'm going to try and remember when those are without looking. We have Monday, August 1st, 4 to 5 p.m. right here before the council meeting. Then there'll be 2 on Thursday. One will be noon to 2 at the Public Works Center, 1200 East 46th Street. Then we'll have an early evening session at the Freight House. Hopefully it'll be a nice evening. We can have the meeting outdoors. I hear there's refreshments down there too. And then on Friday morning, 7:30 to 9 at the chamber offices, which are at 331 West 3rd Street. We have actually we're in production of I'll say a YouTube video, call it a commercial, but anyway, hopefully we'll be getting that posted on our social media channels shortly. So you're all welcome to attend any of the meetings. I'm not going to worry about a quorum, but you should. So maybe you could talk amongst yourself to make sure that you don't have too many at one particular meeting. With that, any questions?
I appreciate that comment, Matt, and we will schedule accordingly.
Excellent.
Any questions from the commissioners at this time? Seeing none, thank you, Matt. We will move on to zoning activity. I see we have no old business, and it's been brought to my attention that one of the cases could actually be tabled tonight. We're going to shuffle things up a little bit, and if in fact it is tabled, that way if there's anybody in attendance, they don't have to wait just to hear that their case has been tabled. Commissioner Tallman, can you start off with case number REZ 18-09?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Case number REZ 18-09, request to rezone 8.134 acres, more or less, of property located east of Utica Ridge Road and north of East 56th Street from CO Office Shop District to C2 General Commercial District. Jared Engler, McCarthy Bush is the petitioner. Staff recommends the Planning and Zoning Commission accept the findings and forward case number REZ 18-09 to the City Council with a recommendation for denial, and I so move.
Second.
Case number REZ 18-09 has been moved and seconded for discussion. Matt?
And I can report that the petitioners requested in writing that this matter be tabled until the July 17th meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I will amend my motion that we table this for, that's one cycle? For one
Correct.
cycle.
Correct. Second. The request to table has been moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Connell.
Yes.
Ebner.
Yes.
Johnson.
Approve.
Kelly.
Yes.
Lammers.
Yes.
Med.
Yes.
Quinn.
Abstain.
Reinhardt.
Yes.
Tolman, yes. That motion for table carries, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We will now move on to the first item of business, case number REZ 18-08. Commissioner Tallman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Case number REZ 18-08, request of William Torcha on behalf of WCT Investments Davenport Series LLC for a rezoning on 6.5 acres, more or less, located along the south of East 53rd Street and east of Lorton Avenue from R1 Low Density Dwelling District to PDD Planned Development District to facilitate commercial development. Staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission forward case number REZ 18-08 to the City Council with the recommendation for approval subject to the following 10 conditions, and I so move.
Second.
Case number REZ 18-08's been moved and seconded for discussion. Ryan. Sorry, I stuck at Scott.
That's fine. Ryan Rusnak, Community Planning, Economic Development. Currently, the property is zoned R1. The petitioner is requesting to acquire 9 home sites to redevelop the property as commercial. As a companion request, that will be considered at a later part of the agenda. They are requesting to vacate a portion of Fairhaven Road. Davenport 35 land use map. The property is currently designated residential general. I won't read the whole thing, but I put up the land use designation description, and I just underlined some text for emphasis. One would be that properties be located, this is residential general, by the way, that they be 1/2 mile walking distance of scattered neighborhood commercial services, and also existing neighborhoods are intended to maintain their character with the exception of long edges and transition areas where higher intensity may be considered. This was the previous language in Davenport 2025. It's similar with a very couple small changes. And that was part of the comp plan update that was ultimately, the land use plan was adopted in August 2018. I think we would all recognize, especially in the planning world, we want to encourage people to walk to their services if they have the opportunity to do so. But putting a commercial service or use in the middle of the neighborhood wouldn't be compatible with the residential area. And so we went through the amendment process. We discussed you could have residential properties, but along those edges, particularly along especially higher transportation corridors, such as Brady Street, Harrison, and things like that, that you could have commercial uses, and they would be compatible, potentially, if they were to mitigate potential negative impacts. And so when we really sat down and discussed the language of Davenport 2035 and looked at the proposal with the submitted land use plan, staff concluded that the proposal was consistent with Davenport 2035 as written. This is due to the proposed scale of the development as depicted on the land use plan and the rezoning conditions recommended by city staff. Even since the adoption of Davenport 2035, there's been a lot of changes to the East 53rd transportation corridor. Have an automotive dealership that gained zoning approval at the southeast corner of Eastern and 53rd. They're currently going through design work currently. Costco development was approved. Costco will be improving East 53rd Street with a signalized intersection with turn lanes at its entrance and 2 eastbound and westbound travel lanes. And also, East 53rd is being designed to be improved to 2 eastbound lanes, 2 westbound lanes with a center turn lane from Brady Street all the way to Elmore Circle. And here's a snapshot of really that looks at the East 53rd Street corridor from I-74 over to the railroad. Predominantly commercial along this corridor. So the PDD zoning classification requires approval of zoning, an associated land use plan, and a subsequent approval of a final development plan. The land use plan comes tied to the zoning. The development is currently subject to the Highway Corridor Overlay District. This is the concept plan. It hasn't changed a whole lot since its initial, since the applicant's initial presentation. The small change that I would note is the exiting and entering through the signalized intersection. They brought that all the way down to the south at the recommendation of their traffic engineer, so you don't have cross traffic trying to get on, and it allows more stacking onto 53rd. Conceptual plan shows 2 drive-through restaurants, a dine-in only restaurant, a retail building. Petitioner indicated that the 8,900 square foot drive-through restaurant would be the initial development, and the rest of the development would be marketed and driven by actual tenants, and that there would be some adjustments expected. I don't think he's made any secret that it's Portillo's that they're looking to develop as the initial phase of the project. And so, in talking with them and understanding what the requirements are for the land use plan, the applicant submitted this. And so it depicts what the lot 2, where the initial restaurant would be, where the initial phase were. And you'll see some of the details on the eastern and western are no longer on the plan. And that is for a reason because, again, they need a little bit of flexibility, but what I encouraged was to depict those things which you are confident or willing to provide on the land use plan. You still see the entrances, fully signalized intersection. You see no access to Lorton. You see a 25-foot landscape buffer along the south and west. You see Fairhaven Road that's being vacated with a turnaround to the south. The land use plan also articulates the lot sizes, the land use types, buildings and impervious surface areas, number of stories, and the location of stormwater outfall. So it's staff's opinion that the land use plan complies with section 1732.050 of the Davenport City Code, which is the minimum requirements for approval of a land use plan. This is page 2 of the land use plan. This is just a rendering to depict the finished grade of the property, the retaining walls, and fence adjacent to the rear property line. This is page 3. This is just a contour map that shows the existing grades of the property. These are the design plans for East 53rd improvements. These would be modified slightly to allow for the commercial development, proposed commercial development to the south. And here's Fairhaven Road. You can kind of see it towards the bottom with a median in front that would become already a right-in, right-out only. So a traffic study was completed prior to release of staff's recommendation. The proposed development is expected to generate 414 new entering trips to the development and 483 new exiting trips in the PM peak hour, and 574 new entering and 564 new exiting trips in the Saturday peak hour. And the reason the peak hour is looked at is because that's the busiest time of the day, and then assuming that if that's the busiest time of day and it has the capacity, then the overall daily traffic infrastructure would be adequate to serve the development as well. The traffic engineer did note that the analysis of the 2019 full build conditions at all intersections maintained accessible levels of services, maintained with the existing intersection configurations. We do have the applicant's traffic engineer here, as well as the city's traffic engineer, if you care to ask for detailed questions about that. The existing traffic on Fairhaven Road, I won't go through the whole thing, but these again are in the PM peak and Saturday peak. What they currently show with existing traffic is there's not a lot of traffic on Fairhaven Road coming southbound or northbound currently. We understood that there were concerns about traffic and what was happening with existing and proposed traffic to the surrounding area. Gary Stats went out to the neighborhood and set up traffic measuring device to better understand the number of vehicles on the roadway, the traveling speed. We did hear that residents thought that traffic had increased quite a bit. The 3-day count on Fairhaven Road north of East 53rd was 140 vehicles a day. Additionally, there was one reported crash on Fairhaven within the past 7 years. A parked car was sideswiped in 2013. Existing traffic on Lorton Avenue. Again, this gives you a glimpse of traffic study of what the existing traffic on Lorton Avenue. Again, not very high, a little bit higher than Fairhaven Road. Again, traffic measuring device were placed in 2 different locations on Lorton Avenue. 3-day count on Lorton Avenue, just south of 53rd, was 377 vehicles a day. 3-day count on Lorton Avenue at a point between 46th and 51st. That was 420 vehicles. Mr. Stats measured that in October of 27, and it actually was a little bit lower. The average speed of those vehicles was 27.6 miles an hour. The speed limit there is 25 miles an hour. There was one crash on Lorton Avenue in the past 7 years, and again, a parked car was sideswiped in 2015. Again, this is the full build scenario, assuming that the Costco and this development came to fruition. And just what we're finding is there'd be a total increase during the PM peak of 17 vehicles, and this is in both directions. There would be an increase of 12 vehicles, both directions, during the Saturday peak. Talk a little bit about stormwater. We do have the developer's engineer here, I believe. Yep, thank you. We also have Eric Longlet from the city who can answer detailed questions about stormwater if you have them. This is just a contour map which shows that the property generally falls to the south, and eventually stormwater makes its way through open swales on the Lorton Avenue drainage swale and Fairhaven swale till eventually gets down to Hamlin's Creek. City regulations require that as developed, the 100-year storm event release rate would be equivalent to a 2-year rain event on a running prairie meadow, essentially requiring less stormwater runoff than what would be with the current development that's out there. The development would contain 2 subsurface water detention systems. One system would outfall to the Lorton Avenue drainage swale. The other would outfall to the Fairhaven Road drainage swale. Stormwater would be directed south in those open swales. First phase of the project would be into the Fairhaven Road drainage system. And this is an example that the applicant provided of the underground stormwater system. We've had a couple of opportunities for public input. There was a neighborhood meeting on June 14th. Approximately 55 people showed up and attended. And I've listed those on the screen there. They're also in your packet. June 19th, the Plan and Zoning Commission held a public hearing. Residents within 200 feet were notified of both of those meetings. We posted signs for the property. Again, these are the concerns that were voiced. At the public hearing, someone alluded to the drainage condition out there. They provided me with a thumb drive, so I've included all of those pictures in your packet. I'm just going to just go through and show you a few that were provided.
I think I have another one you need to look at.
But again, I would note that this is not developed to city standards. This isn't a piped drainage system. This is an open swale system. This infrastructure was developed before it was before these city standards existed. Here's a map of formal protests that we've received. There's a 200-foot radius, and I've also highlighted in pink where we've received written protests. We did have one letter of non-protest, and that's in green, also within the 200-foot notice area. Just through our staff review and of this project, I've attempted to kind of go through and talk through some of the concerns that we've listened to the surrounding property owners, and just attempted to try and respond to those. Certainly, increased traffic is something we heard on East 53rd Street and surrounding neighborhoods. We do have a traffic impact analysis which shows that the infrastructure of East 53rd would be able to handle this and other development, including the Costco. Traffic impact analysis would maintain acceptable level of service through all the intersections, and only a marginal increase on traffic on Lorton. The area south of the intersection of East 53rd and Lorton Avenue should be vacated and a cul-de-sac with a gate installed. Again, we only see a marginal increase on Lorton Avenue. I did reach out to the Davenport Fire Department. They expressed concerns with closing that roadway just based on their response times. They further indicated they did not have an issue with the turn lanes or the proposed development as proposed. Certainly the city has concerns over the precedent that this would set for future requests. And we do have one of the property owners that would be most affected by this on the west side of Lorton that said they were not in favor of that. We did hear concerns about existing conditions of Lorton Avenue and Fairhaven Road, and that Lorton Avenue at the signal of Lorton and 53rd is not timed properly. As I mentioned, these roadways were built when area was unincorporated and therefore not built to city standards. However, we would look at those concerns related to maintenance of existing infrastructure and not really a large increase of impact caused by this development. Another concern was the increased storm drainage along Lorton Avenue and Fairhaven Road. As I mentioned, the release rate of stormwater would be less than the release rate of the property as currently developed. Also, the existing condition of drainage along Lorton Avenue. Again, this is relates to the maintenance of existing storm infrastructure. We do believe that there would be an opportunity to maintain infrastructure. At the June 14th neighborhood meeting, I had a resident that said, well, my culvert's currently plugged up right now. So certainly things like that could be maintained to allow stormwater to flow where it needs to flow to. The encroachment of commercial development to the neighborhood would devalue property. Staff's opinion that the development as proposed and the rezoning conditions recommended by city staff would adequately safeguard surrounding properties. There's a big difference between just rezoning this property to commercial and saying develop what with city code. I think there are a number of safeguards with the land use plan and city recommendations that make this a neighborhood compatible development. Again, is this consistent with the long-term plans for Davenport? And again, I just reiterate, after we analyzed it, it's staff's opinion that it is consistent with the Davenport 2035 future land use map designation. Again, this is due to the proposed scale and conditions. And also I reiterate the plan improvements to East 53rd facilitate commercial development at this location. Essentially, you have a Costco development with a signalized intersection right in front of this development. Findings: commercial use of the property would comply with Davenport 2035 based on the scale and the development depicted on the land use plan and rezoning conditions. Design of the proposed commercial use of the property and help mitigate any potential negative impacts to surrounding residential property owners. Traffic impact study demonstrates additional traffic caused by the development would not significantly impact adjacent roadways. And lastly, planned improvements to East 53rd Street facilitate commercial development at this location. These are 7 of the 10 conditions. That the property substantially comply with the PDD land use plan. A 25-foot landscape buffer be maintained along the south property line. That a fence be placed in this area. That 25-foot landscape buffer be maintained along the west property line, that there be no vehicular access to Lorton Avenue, that the following uses be prohibited. And I should say on the land use plan limits the uses of the property to retail, office, and restaurant only. Because there's a couple of retail uses that may not be compatible with surrounding neighborhoods. Staff is recommending that there be no carry-out sales of alcoholic beverages, gasoline stations, or car washes. I think dumpster locations and the noise associated with that was something that was discussed. We are recommending that dumpsters be located at least 60 feet from the south and west property line. Lighting was another concern, that parking lot lighting be shielded and directed away from the residential properties to the south and west. Number 7, that a sidewalk be installed from East 53rd sidewalk into proposed development. Again, if this is a neighborhood scale development, pedestrians should be able to walk to it and access the property. And that the west driveway access to East 53rd turnaround and drive-through lanes extend south. On the land use plan, it really only showed the striping at the north, so we want to make sure that this is a condition and they follow through with it. And again, as Matt mentioned, we do have a new zoning ordinance that's coming into play, and how this rezoning affects that. So we did say we do have a condition that it be rezoned to something as similar in the new code as we can get. These conditions would carry forward, and that's why staff also placed the condition that the proposed development achieve consistency with the land use plan. So that concludes my presentation, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ryan. Would commissioners at this time have any questions of staff or Ryan? Commissioner Reinhardt.
Thank you. Ryan, I remember from the presentation 2 weeks ago when I asked about what the flow rate was going to be out of the water storage system. I've got written down here 3 cubic feet per second or as low as 2 cubic feet per second. Is that still correct?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that we can engineer what the outfall is. What I can tell you what the code says as far as outfall goes.
Well, I guess my concern is that I got this number from somebody, maybe it was from their engineer, and 3 cubic feet per second is 1,300 gallons a minute. That concerns me.
Is that okay, Mr. Chair?
Absolutely. Come up.
Yes, that number is pretty close to being correct.
So that the 2 to 3 cubic feet per second flow rate outfall from the storage section. How big is the storage section? The storage underground?
The volume,
Yeah, volume, gallons.
I don't have that number right in front of me right now. But, you know, to store the 100-year event and only release, you know, a 3 cubic feet per second, the 100-year event may be like 20, somewhere around 18 to 20 cubic feet per second. So we have to store that whole entire event. So that volume, I could try to do the math real quick here, but I don't have that number
Okay.
in front of me. Sorry.
Is that going to be one single point where the outfall water is going to leave your storage containment, or is it going to be spread over a number of outfall points?
2 points is what we're proposing right now that we've talked with staff and that they've supported so far. 2 separate systems as well. Each system has 1 outfall point.
So there'll be roughly a maximum of 1,400 gallons a minute spread between 2 points.
Correct.
Is that going to be directed into existing swales, or is that going to go into a stormwater system, or?
The existing roadside ditches at the point where our property touches those public right-of-ways.
Okay.
So those roadside ditches, that's where we're talking about discharging the water. And, you know, the biggest thing with a discharge is that we want to make sure we control velocity. So there's a lot of tools we can use at that outfall to dissipate any energy and make sure that energy that's dissipated there that, you know, yes, we will have that many gallons that we're going to eventually have to get rid of, but they'll be at a laminar type flow to where our velocities are well below erosive
Yeah,
velocities.
you're going to have a certain amount of head pressure coming down that hill that's going to provide additional velocity. Do you plan on
After
using
our
controllable
discharge.
weirs if you need to?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that in your design right now?
We haven't really pushed it that far yet. I mean, we know we have all those tools in our toolbox that we can use,
Okay.
and so once we get a better feel for exactly what is going to be happening downstream of us, it could be city staff's, you know, suggestion and our suggestion that we need to look at, you know, some protection of that stream. I mean, it just kind of depends on what we get into when we get into the finer points of the detail.
Yeah, hydraulic loading is a big concern that I have, at least based on the way the properties are set up, and you know, if we're actually going to be potentially at 1,400 gallons a minute, that's a lot of water.
So we're definitely diverting, you know, there's water right now that goes to rear yards and
Right.
those homes that will no longer ever go there. So we are taking water from and making things way better for those particular lots and then putting it into public infrastructure instead of throwing it onto private
Well,
infrastructure.
I understand that, but what you're doing is basically concentrating the flows instead of spreading it over 6 acres or whatever it is. You're concentrating the flows into two
Concentrating the
outfalls.
flows into those receiving
Two outfalls. Okay.
outfalls. Yeah,
All right. Thank you.
sure.
Point of clarification, does any of your storage just go into groundwater, or is it all discharged?
No, I mean as much as
I'd like to
as much
clarify.
as the soils will accept, which we'll find out in our when we do our soil borings exactly what that, you know, feet per second infiltration rate is. But yeah, the idea is that you store that water for just as long as you can, and that's a maximum rate. You know, at a lot of times that storm event it won't be flowing near that full, but that's the worst case event. 100-year rain, yes, that could happen. Most of the time, we're talking about, you know, your inch and you know, an hour or whatever type of rain event will be way less than that, and we're going to store that water and try to push as much of it back into the ground as we can, and that's what your guys' new water quality standards let us, you know, ask us to do.
Thank you. Thank you. Commissioner Lammers.
This will be for Ryan,
Thank
if
you.
you don't mind. On condition 1, it says the property will be substantially developed in accordance with the PDD use plan. Who is held accountable for that? Who oversees that indeed happens?
City staff would, and also this commission and the city council ultimately would approve a final development plan.
Okay, for all, not just the known entity, but for the other lots as well?
Yes, we, through a combination of, what we tried to do was place a combination of ordinance conditions combined with the land use plan. What that is, you know, when we say substantially in accordance with, understanding that there may be some minor flexibility, but those ordinance conditions are in stone essentially.
Okay, I just didn't recall seeing that strong of language, and so I just wanted to verify. And the other question I have is on the traffic study, page 21 in the section 4.5, it gave 2 recommendations for improvement. One is addressed in your conditions, but the second was not. And I just wondered, with as much investment that's being made to that particular area on both sides, why wouldn't we consider that second one?
Well,
as a
because that's the other one relates to the driveway of the Costco and traffic moving south from the Costco intersection, moving through into this development, right? When the Costco was developed, this property wasn't really under consideration, so there was no turning movement or through traffic coming through. And so the traffic engineer suggested, you know, if you should reach out to Costco and see if they would do a slight redesign to allow traffic that wants to go through. But we did feel it wouldn't be appropriate to place it as a condition associated with this development.
Is that going to be an initiative and conversation that will happen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kelling.
Thank you. Ryan, I too have some concerns about the stormwater thing, as we always do here. could you come back up and maybe find one of your schematics that show these outfall locations and just exactly where they would drain? I mean, I've seen it in our packet, but I want to ask you a couple questions.
Land use plan shows outfall, this location. And there's an outfall in this location.
Okay. So the water is collected in these subsurface storage areas, basins, and then it's released at these outfall points. How does it, at what rate does it, well, I guess we've already asked that, how does it get to the drainage ways? I mean, does it just spew out, and say on the western one on Lorton, does it run down the east side of Lorton?
Yes.
Will the flow rate then be contained in the drainage ditch there, or do we anticipate flooding because of the release rate on that street?
We don't anticipate flooding. I think that what we believe is that any water that's been rising up is due to that these drainage swales have not been properly maintained. And so I think there's an opportunity to go in, clean out some of these swales, make sure that culverts and things like that are not plugged up. So no, we don't believe this will exacerbate any flooding.
And going on to the east side on the Fairhaven drainage way, what side of Fairhaven, east or west side of Fairhaven, does the flow occur?
I believe it's on the east because there is a swale on the west side. However, let me back up to another map here.
I can show you.
Comes down Fairhaven along this location. And before we get to this subdivision, there's an inlet here. It's piped across the street, and water drains to this right away to this area here.
So in that location, the water coming out of the outfall area would actually be running over the top of the vacated Fairhaven street to get to the east side drainage way?
No, what they would do is design it so the water outflows to that ditch directly, or do some way to get it across there.
So it'd have to be piped maybe under the old Fairhaven route to get to the east side, or how would it get there?
Well, no, it would be incorporated into the development. So Fairhaven Road is going to be partially vacated, and so they would pipe it to the location of the outfall where it needs to be.
All right. Okay. One other question, Mr. Chairman. Ryan, one of the concerns was the timing of the light at Lorton. I'm not sure I know exactly what that means, but the city response in our packet was the concern relates to the maintenance of existing infrastructure. Are we saying that the timing on that light perhaps is not what it should be?
No, so what we had a resident at one of our neighborhood meetings, and I'm showing you the location up here. They said that if you were in a vehicle and you pulled up to East 53rd Street, there was a sensor, and it wasn't feeling the sensor and the light wasn't changing, so somebody had to get out and press the button and then the light would change. And so the only reason I was saying that wasn't saying that the timing was off, just saying that relates to something that the city should be dealing with as far as maintenance of infrastructure.
So that's, all right, so that was my real question. What does maintenance of infrastructure mean? It has nothing to do with the roadway. It has something to do with the operating features of the signal.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
And it could be a sensor that's in the right of way that's not, picking up a vehicle, but yes.
All right, thank you.
I need to remind the audience to please keep your comments to yourself until you're recognized to speak. Show a little respect, please. Commissioner Med.
This question is on the traffic impacts. I don't know if it's for the traffic engineer or you, Ryan, but what is an acceptable level of service that we're meeting with this?
Gary Stotts, traffic engineer. Kind of depends on where you're at. Now, in the very busy area, we can go as bad as a D or an E, during the very worst times. But, I mean, typically a C is a normal level service, during peak hours. But during the worst times, it's usually down to a D in heavily congested areas. I don't know if that's what was designed for their traffic engineer, what he said, in his report. But that's usually what we say, keep it above an F is the goal.
So these are academic grades that you give to how long it takes to get from Jersey Ridge to Utica Ridge, or how do you measure that?
Well, more or less. I mean, it's like a grade, and it's based on the delay, the average delay. So if it's, I don't even remember all the numbers, but 15 seconds or less is an A, and so on. And there's various ranges for each letter.
So acceptable is a C?
You have those? Okay. Yeah, so 10 or less is an A, 10 to 20 B, 20 to 35 C, 35 to 55 is D, and 55 to 80 is E.
So you buried that in all those numbers, eh?
Yeah.
Did it? Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Reinhardt.
Thank you. This is a follow-up on the water issue again. Just assuming that the design right now to handle the 1,400 gallons a minute isn't sufficient to solve the water flooding problem, is there any type of contingency plan with the developer to fix the problem?
I mean, the bottom line is the developer has to demonstrate with the existing infrastructure there through stormwater calculations that the infrastructure is adequate to handle the water. And if they can't, yes, then there has to be some accommodation to handle that stormwater.
Okay, so there is a way to protect the neighborhood.
So yeah, when we go through administrative site plan, I think what the engineer had talked about initially is, well, we haven't designed that yet. This is a preliminary approval. I think where a property owner or applicant in this case gets to that next stage, and it costs a considerable more amount of money, is the full design of the development with all the engineering and the stormwater calculations, and so it's common to wait until you get those preliminary approvals in order to say yes, go ahead and spend the money to study and to fully engineer and design this.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much.
Commissioners have any additional questions before I open up the floor to the audience? Seeing none, if anybody would like to step forward from the audience to speak either in opposition or in favor of this petition, please do so. Please identify yourself. Please try to keep your comments less than 5 minutes.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, P&Z Commissioners. My name is Michael Malloy. I'm a Bettendorf attorney here representing numerous residents who are opposing this particular development. We came before you folks on June 19th, and as you can see, there is a bigger crowd here tonight to speak to you on these issues and to express their opposition. And I would just ask anybody in the audience who is here tonight who is opposing this rezoning or has serious questions about this rezoning that have not been answered to either stand up or hold up their hand. Thank you. I've listened to the staff report tonight, and I've also listened to Portello's, and there's two main areas here, ladies and gentlemen, that have not been answered by the developer here. Number one is the traffic congestion that's going to be caused by this development. Number two is the whole stormwater drainage issue that Commissioner Reinhardt has brought up tonight with questions by the commission. First of all, if you look at this so-called traffic impact study that was done by a group out of Downers Grove, Illinois, June 26, 2018, this traffic study was thrown together in less than 7 days' time, and the traffic study is fatally flawed. The reason it's fatally flawed is because this traffic study cannot logically incorporate what's going to happen regarding the traffic congestion from the Costco development when the Costco development has not been developed on 53rd Street yet. This Costco development is going to be almost directly across the street from Portello's, and make no mistake, there is no traffic study or no traffic study group that can logically project the traffic that Costco will generate until Costco is actually opening and operating at that site and the traffic flows comes in and out of the Costco site. This traffic study, of course, is going to tell you that everything is good and rosy and that there's no problems with traffic that will be generated by this development. We believe that this is false and misleading. We believe that this particular development will cause traffic jams, traffic backups on both 53rd Street and possibly also Fairhaven Road and Lorton Avenue. Now, I listened to what the developer said about the stormwater issue, and basically what they've told you is that they don't have a plan here. They're going to simply discharge the stormwater into the roadside ditches that are existing on Lorton Avenue and Fairhaven Road. They don't have any piping system for the stormwater, and make no mistake about it, this development involving 9 properties and is going to include 3 or 4 different commercial developments. The paving and the concrete work on this will generate an immense increase in the stormwater flow, which is going to go directly south of 53rd Street. And when you have a mega development like this between Fairhaven Road and Lorton Avenue, you ought to have a planned stormwater piping system to control the flow of the stormwater. They don't have one because they want to rely upon the cheap answer here, which is we'll let it flow into the roadside ditches. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think based upon your own experience and knowledge, you may well agree that this is not an adequate stormwater flow system or discharge system for this size of development to have in the city of Davenport along the south side of 53rd Street. These questions regarding the traffic and the stormwater beg the issue of the fact that this development is not even ready to be voted on because there have not been sufficient answers pertaining to either the traffic issue or the stormwater issue. And we are asking the commission table this tonight so that the petitioner can provide sufficient information on both the traffic and stormwater issue. And then finally, staff's comment was that the development will substantially comply with the PDD. Why does staff use the word substantially comply? Why don't they just say it will comply with the planned development district ordinance? This substantially apparently allows staff and the developer to have wiggle room to change things that may be presented to you folks or the city council, and after the fact they may decide that they really don't want to do it that way or can't do it that way for some economic reason, and then the plan can be changed. A plan is a plan. They ought to either comply with it or not comply with it. It ought to be clear. It ought to be a black and white plan so that the residents, the people that live here in this area, know what's going to happen to this property. And so that ought to be addressed too, that if this property is going to be rezoned to a planned development district, the property ought to comply with the PDD, not substantially comply. What does substantially mean? It means little or nothing, because then there's all kinds of changes that can be made under the terms of the PDD. So I would ask the commission to consider tabling this tonight, and I'm sure there's other people that want to get up here and possibly address issues regarding the rezoning. Thank you. If anybody has any questions, I'll try to address them.
I see none at this time. Thank you. Next.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Christopher Glass, here to speak in favor of the rezoning request here. And I think, as Mr. Malloy pointed out, about half of the room here stood up or raised their hand in opposition to this, which I don't. It's not surprising. I certainly, myself, after the last meeting, drove out to the area, drove down Lorton, drove down Fairhaven, and those roads are, as the city pointed out, unincorporated roads originally, and they're not in great condition. I 100% agree with that, and I think that's something the city should address in future plans is redeveloping that roadway and looking at stormwater issues down there as well. So I certainly side with the residents in their concerns there. As the city also pointed out, one thing that was discussed a lot last meeting was the city's master plan and how this didn't fit into the master plan. And I think probably more so on the commissioner's side, you guys understand that the master plans, they're not going to go and just take a residential area and say, hey, we're going to make this commercial in the next 10 years. You know, it's not typically how master plans are developed. And so, you know, as we see things like this, and as the city pointed out, this is an acceptable use under the Davenport 2035 plan. You know, the Portillo's establishment, looking at some research, they bring in roughly $7 to $8 million annually in revenue in a single store. That's an average. They employ roughly 100 people in the community, and they're good paying jobs. You know, they're a higher end and for a fast food joint. And I think what we've heard from the developers here is they are working hard to work with the neighborhood in the stormwater issues. There are open ditches. There's issues there. Being able to take a 100-year flood event and drop it down as much as they are able to is fairly impressive. We've seen that with St. Ambrose. I've actually seen that same technologies being worked on over in Bettendorf near my house right now. So there's certainly a lot of things that are being done from the developer's end to help make this neighborhood work with the development. You know, aside from that, I just think the one thing that I keep looking at is so many times we've got great opportunities for this community to come about. We lost out on a great opportunity a long time back with the NASCAR track, which ended up going to Joliet. And I don't want to continue to see issues like that come about within the city to be able to grow and attract new and great businesses like Costco, like Portillo's, and future locations because everybody wants to look for a better location for that. We've seen, you know, the developer, I'm sure, have spent the last year looking at locations here locally. We know North Elmore, the cheapest piece of land up there is about $5 million right now, and not many people are going to go pay for that to put a restaurant in. And so, you know, I think they've done a good job in identifying the best possible location based on what their clientele wants and what their clients in Portillo's needs. And so I'm asking that you guys vote to approve this location and forward it on to City Council tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next.
Hello, my name is Charlotte McManus. I spoke to you on the 19th, a little bit about my beautiful Lorton Avenue. My husband Craig and I have lived at 4728 Lorton Avenue since 1972 when we purchased a new home there. In the recent years, we've added quite a bit of land. We have almost 3 acres, and it's beautiful, and I consider it my paradise. The roads, of course, are not paradise, but I've lived with that, and I still love Lorton Avenue. All of my friends and the residents of 51st and on Fairhaven They have struggled a lot with the water runoffs. They're almost like ravines in the backyard now and in the front ditches. I don't know if any of you have taken the time to drive through it. Some of the press has. It's unbelievable, the water retention that is out there. The traffic patterns, I don't know who made up these traffic analysis, but they are totally inaccurate. I view it every day, and I know it's very dangerous. That's one of my considerations for, I'm not against development. I was a realtor. I believe in development, but I believe in citizens' rights, and people have put so much time and money and much of their lives into these properties deserve some attention to what you are going to decide. I don't object. I would withdraw my objection to the rezoning if the recommendations to improve Lorton with cul-de-sacs and speed bumps and speed lights. We don't need any fatalities. This is the week of the 4th of July. Men have fought and died for their rights. We have fought at our area that we love so much, and hopefully no one has to die over it. Like I said, Lorton and my home are my paradise. Please don't make it a speeding hell. That's all I ask of you. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next.
I'm Craig McManus. I live at 4728 Lorton. If you guys could look at the map, not that one, but you'll see there's 2 stop signs, one coming out of Costco and one at Lorton. Our concern, our fear, is that people are going to come down to that, trying to get away from the traffic, and they are going to come right down Lorton. And I have real contention with your traffic pattern studies because it was done by a customer of Portello's and probably paid by Portello's. The traffic study for Costco was done in February. And this one is done before anything has happened. It's all presupposition. You don't know what's going to be down there. We have people walking with their dogs. We have people enjoying that area. It's a half a mile down, a half mile back. It is one of the best unknown secrets in the Quad Cities. And for the city to lay it out like they have is just objectionable, and then I just totally disagree that this thing should go forward. You need to table it, or you need to say adios. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening. My name's Adam Bruner of 4840 Fairhaven Avenue. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. Portillo's is near and dear to my heart. It's one of my favorite restaurants. I think one of the things that I'm looking for tonight is how the city's going to be held accountable. We've done a lot to hold the developers accountable, but I think they've done a really good job at setting forth an adequate plan for how they're going to mitigate some of the risk. I think what we're seeing is where they connect and interface with this neighborhood and how they're going to impact with the existing infrastructure that is there is a problem. We're looking at the roads, the signals, the speed, and the water runoff. Those things, really what I'm looking for is accountability from the city on how you're going to handle those problems and have that be worked into the zoning request. It's unfair to hold the developers to that standard, but I think we need some accountability from the city to take that money that Portillo's is absolutely going to bring in tax dollars and reinvest this in this neighborhood, maybe in the first year or two, and then continue to live off that tax money from then on. But I think we need to invest in this 807 zip code and really show this neighborhood how much value it's bringing to the city. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Next.
Hello. Brad Nielsen, 4838 Lorton Avenue. Been a resident out there about 25 years now, and I can't predict the future, but I can tell you what I have dealt with probably over the last 3 years. And that is coming home from Lorton off of 53rd. I have actually not been able to get home because there is basically a river running down at 51st Street. The water's probably, I couldn't even get out of my truck, and I have a four-wheel drive truck. I can't pass. I actually have to detour to get home. That's what we're dealing with now when we have a substantial amount of rain. I'm not talking about a 100-year rain or a 100-year event. I'm talking about in the last 3 years, I've had to reroute myself at least 3 to 4 times. So that's I would say something that really needs to be looked into, because all we're going to do now is have more water coming our way. So thank you.
Thank you. Next.
I'm Gwen Runge, 5027 Fairhaven, and I'm a little confused about a couple things. I know you've addressed the water coming out of the new development. Where is the water from Costco going? Is that also going to be going down Lorton and Fairhaven? And there's water coming out of that apartment complex also. The drainage does not work there on Fairhaven. I'm on the east side of the street, and the water does not run down our east side of the street. It goes down the west side of the street. People's yards are eroding. The storm we had a couple days ago was ugly. One of my neighbors had about an 8-foot, 10-foot wide path of water in her front yard. It did dissipate, but that's a lot of water. Also, I wondered if you put a traffic counter on 46th and Lorton. Because I know a lot of my neighbors, we don't go up to 53rd anymore because we can't get out. I'm concerned about the school buses getting out. Let's see. And you said something about ditch maintenance. I'm not aware that anything has been done in that area by the city in probably at least 25 years. I could be wrong, but nothing has been, I haven't seen anything done. I know the water doesn't drain down my side of the road. So, and when they put Elmore through, we had a standing joke that people were coming down Fairhaven looking for the Northwest Passage to avoid the traffic there. Unfortunately, Fairhaven's a dead end, and 40 miles an hour and slamming on the brakes on that tar and gravel road composite that's put there is not a safe thing. There are lots of potholes. City's out there all the time filling them up. We have no sidewalks. People have kids in strollers. It's a concern, and I thank you if somebody could address those questions.
Thank you. Staff, could we get a point of clarification as to the runoff from Costco and the apartment complex?
Yes, it is directed toward the Lorton Avenue drainage swale.
Okay. Thank you.
Good evening, sirs, ma'ams. I'm Howard Reed, 4919 Lorton. I spoke to you on the 19th. And quite frankly, the next day I saw a speed camera or some kind of camera on the corner of 46 and Lorton. I don't know what it was there for. I don't know how long it was there, but I did see it. My concern mostly is what makes common sense to us. You go down Elmore, try to take a left, and take another left to get into Patellos? Or do you come down Lorton and take a right and a quick right to get into Patellos? Which one makes the most sense to regular drivers, especially coming off of 53rd? I will ask any of you, do any of you live between 53rd and 46th in Jersey Ridge and Elmore? Seeing none, I guess not. Ladies and gentlemen, we do. We know what kept us there. We know what would like to keep us here. Now, I like a good hot dog. I absolutely love a good hot dog. So I will probably go to Patello's at some point. But I would rather have a Patello's hot dog in your backyard rather than have one in mine.
Thank you. Next.
Hello, Brandy Ottersonhurst, 4834 Fairhaven Court. I have many concerns, including the extra traffic and this traffic study. It just seems absurd because you can ask most of my neighbors. That traffic study showed that there was a car 11 times, I think, on Fairhaven one day. Well, I'm probably those 11 times. And I'm not even joking. I have 3 boys, 3 different schools, different sports. I am coming and going like you wouldn't believe. You can ask any of the neighbors. So the traffic study it's wrong. And that's not even including Lorton. When I go down Lorton, that's just Fairhaven. And I even try to avoid that because the traffic's so bad you can't get out on 53rd. You sometimes have a hard time just turning right. But also, I brought up the bus issue with my kids. The bus drops off at 51st and Fairhaven, and I've contacted Durham Bus Services. They will not drop off in my cul-de-sac. So by closing Fairhaven, where are my elementary school age kids and the rest of the kids in the neighborhood? Where are they walking from? A longer distance, more traffic. That's a safety issue. And keep in mind, there's no sidewalks. And, I'm sure if any of you drove through this neighborhood, you would see more than just the overhead photos and the rooftops and the treetops. They're not showing you the nice homes and the dozens of mature trees that you can't find in a lot of neighborhoods. We have lots of wildlife out there, coyote, deer, fox, ducks, bats, owls, many rare birds. By taking these trees out, you're not only taking out their food source, their homes, and ours. These trees are cut up, homes put into landfills, and the animals don't have space that they're used to roam. And Davenport doesn't have a lot of these wooded areas in the middle of neighborhoods. We should be promoting them. These are breeding areas, resting areas for many of the birds. It might sound crazy, but they stop there for migration, while they're clearing ground, and making fewer areas for wildlife is what we're doing. We're nibbling at these neighborhoods, and ours in particular. And it's just very important that we should be preserving these wooded areas. And it's funny, when I walked in here for the meeting, the sign on the front door said something about preserving Davenport. We need to preserve these wooded areas and our neighborhoods. Those trees, they act as a noise barrier, and you can't tell me that a 6-foot fence is equivalent to dozens of mature trees. It will take a half a century, at least, to get these trees to the size they are now. And that's what attracts home buyers. That's what attracted all of us, not fast food restaurants. This is why many of us chose this location. We have zoning to preserve our land, our residential land. That's why we sacrifice this. Why sacrifice this, I should say. You can put it someplace else, especially when there's so many empty businesses right now. 1 block east where Grand Appliance is, there's a strip mall there. Just what, it sounds like you're proposing in our area. 4 empty businesses and 1 large empty restaurant space available. 1 block. Then you go south on Elmore, there's more land right there. And then what about the Toys R Us location? Hey, that's ready. You got 2 entrances right by the mall. And, they talk about Elmore being so expensive. What about these other locations? Why are we giving in to these businesses that threaten us with only building in a certain location, or they'll leave? Shouldn't we be protecting our neighborhoods to attract new families, not seeing empty storefronts or fast food restaurants in the middle of a nice neighborhood? And why should our neighborhood be ripped apart because they want a cheap piece of land? And restaurants, they're prone to turnovers. How do we know what's going to be there in 10 years? McDonald's, Checkers, maybe Hertz Donuts, since that location's been so secretive. While Portello's closes at midnight, Hertz will be opening. There's always going to be noise there. There's always going to be traffic. that was the big thing that, people were complaining about the noise, and Portillo's claimed that they would be done by midnight. Well, again, what about these other businesses? You're going to see more traffic. More traffic. You're prone to more accidents. There was an accident near 53rd and Fairhaven on Saturday. No one mentioned that. And many people that I spoke with say, the city's already made up its mind. They don't listen. They don't care, about the residents, about their concerns. So why speak up? Why go to these meetings? Well, we hope our concerns were heard, and you agree with us that the negatives outweigh the positives. I ask that you prove them wrong and don't rezone our neighborhood. Prove them wrong.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening. I'm Justin Morris with Altitude. We've only been there a month, but I can definitely side with the homeowners' feelings and fears of the water drainage, as those last couple of weeks where we had all those floods, that water was coming down into that right-hand corner of that screen right into our floor. So definitely something needs to be done before anything else is, approved. But I am here to side with Portillo's being here. There's no reason it shouldn't be. It would create a huge economic boom. It's going to draw in foot traffic for Betplex, which is just built in. I mean, people coming from Chicago for baseball tournaments are going to immediately recognize that. They're going to have that restaurant. They're going to go there. I also side kind of with all their fears with the roads. And it's easy to see why. I mean, obviously, yes, residents have lived here a long time. They're going to take Lorton. They're going to take Fairhaven to try and cut up there. But then you got to consider that all the tourists and things like that are here visiting. They don't know any better, and they will be taking 53rd and things like that. So there's obviously got to be some road things done. There's obviously got to be some drainage things done before this completely gets approved. But we totally support it. We don't see why not. We love the new neighbors. We got a bunch of empty buildings over there on Elmore. We got the huge Dick's Sporting Goods building. We want to fill all that up. And I mean, I was obviously booming while Illinois is going like this, right? And that's why there's no Portillo's going in Illinois right now over on that side of the river. So let's get it on this side. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening. I'm Travis Unterzuber. I am a resident of the Lakehurst 5th Edition. So obviously my input is not a not in my backyard basis. However, I am a resident of Davenport who uses the 53rd Street corridor. I also recognize that we all benefit from responsible commercial development. I do appreciate the extent of the analysis done by the city staff and sharing that with us, making it so transparent. And I understand that they are looking at it as a legal interpretation of the code and what the code could be. But I also have to say we need to think about in this process what makes sense. One of the things I've learned as I've matured in life is I need to be less impulsive and more understanding of all the views of an issue. As I've looked at this and I've read and I've listened, and I have friends who are resident of the neighborhood, but that's not necessarily why I'm speaking to you. I come back to one concern, though, when I look at this particular location. I keep asking myself, are we doing too much too fast? I feel like there are too many unknowns in that respective area right now. In other words, what is the real impact of Costco? I doubt if there's anyone who can tell us what is the traffic account going to really be when Costco's is up and running. We don't know. We know it's going to increase. We feel like we've made plans to accommodate that, but we really don't know what it's going to be until they're operating. The second one is, what is going to be the stormwater situation when Costco is in place? And I would love to meet the civil engineer or hydrologist who can predict the 100-year event once Costco's in place. I think we're going to be looking a long time for that person. The third point I look at is what is going to be the real use of this 6.5 acre parcel. We know they talk about 4 different businesses in there. We would like to think the businesses will be mixed, and there will be some that will have less intensity of usage with respect to traffic. But we really don't know, because once you slap a zoning classification on land, it becomes difficult to control what the actual business is within that zoning criteria. So I ask myself, is this a case where we should not necessarily say no, meaning never, but is this definitely something where we need to say not now? Because I feel if we make the wrong decision now, we're going to be living with a lot of issues in the future. And the question is, who addresses those? The developer's going to be out of the picture. They've developed the property. The ownership is transferred to a holding company somewhere or a bigger business. There could be 4 different businesses you have to deal with. None of them are going to accept responsibility for the developer's work. So then someone will say, well, the city has to take care of it. And I turn around and say, okay, let's look around and let's talk about who is the city. And it's us, the taxpayers. So I really urge some caution, consideration, and maybe we say not now. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Lisa Van Damme. I'm at 2771 East 51st. Is right on the corner of Fairhaven and 51st. The water is definitely the biggest issue, along with the traffic. The water doesn't run down the west side. It runs down the east side. It takes the corner, and it comes right in my driveway. And the last storm was a good one from that. Shows the whole side all the way around the corner. It goes around my fence, right down in between me and my neighbor's house, and then it cuts straight across his backyard to the creek. That's the same path it's had, I believe, for many, many years. I'm told from prior residents of mine, it was a water issue right into my house at one time. Things got done that helped or whatever, but it is still yet there now. And the water does dissipate, but my ditches stay wet for days afterwards. Then you got all the bugs and everything else to go with it to worry about. I quit taking Lorton to try to go left a long time ago. Well, you couldn't on Fairhaven, so I would try to go to the lights when I had to carpool kids and everything, and those lights have never been activated right or whatever that way. So mostly, and only take a right turn off of Fairhaven, we'll have to wait a good amount of time just to take a right, and I'm only taking a right to be right in the turning angle again, usually to go to Aldi. But the traffic and the water is a big problem.
Thank you. Next.
Mary Nelson, I live at 1633 Irishwood Circle. A lot of the people that came up 2 weeks ago and that are coming up tonight have talked about the experience that they've had with the water runoff in those neighborhoods. And it sounds like it's been going on for many, many years. So my question is, to the city of Davenport is, first of all, why haven't you fixed it before now? And second of all, is the city of Davenport willing to fix it if this development is going to go in, having not addressed it even before now with existing problems, if they become worse? is there a plan in place now to fix the water runoff in those neighborhoods? And if there is, why hasn't it been done? And is the city of Davenport willing to address it if this development is approved?
Thank you. Staff like to comment?
Excuse me, Eric Longlet, Engineering Manager, Public Works. To address the comment, there is nothing on the CIP for addressing the roads or the drainage in that area at this time. We have been listening to the comments made and have looked in, or haven't looked into, but have been listening to. To address some of these comments would mean redoing the roads, adding storm sewer, adding sidewalks, which would entail also possibly right away. It would be something that we would have to work, excuse me, with the developer and after the development happens. As stated before, we don't have the design of the development at this time to see what the development is doing, stormwater wise or traffic wise. So at the time that we get the design, we can look at those numbers.
Thank you, Eric. Next.
Good evening. My name's Jeff Talbert. I'm at 4822 Fairhaven Court, and I took some time from the last 2 weeks to meet some of my neighbors. I've only been in the neighborhood for approximately coming up on 5 years, and the one thing that we can all agree upon is everybody loves their neighborhood. The rest of it was kind of hit or miss. But I did go ahead and start a petition for the neighborhood, which I'll hand to staff as I finish. And basically, it's a very simple statement, very short. It says, "We, the undersigned citizens of Davenport, call on our city officials to make Lorton Avenue a cul-de-sac at 53rd with restricted access limited to emergency vehicles and school bus traffic only. Without such modification, we object to the proposed zoning change along 53rd from residential to commercial." I did not incorporate anything about water runoff. I kept it very simple, just to basically what we're looking at as a whole is protecting a neighborhood and a lifestyle that we've all come to really enjoy and love. This further states the alternative vision we are proposing will reduce impact on surrounding businesses, neighborhoods, and commuters, increase traffic safety on 53rd and Lorton Avenue, reduce congestion during peak travel times, resolve residential traffic concerns, and preserve the quiet, family-friendly neighborhoods to the south. Included in this, although not everybody could appear tonight, are 46 signatures, which again, I'll hand to staff. I thank you for the opportunity to address you this evening. There were a number of concerns that have come up that I've listened to from my fellow citizens. And one of the things I'd like to bring to your attention is after the large storm that we had and the water runoff that we saw coming down to Lorton and Fairhaven, it did actually come down and cross the streets, blocking the streets at a couple different places. You heard from one resident tonight who's got most of the runoff comes down Fairhaven. It doesn't go in the ditches like it's supposed to. It crosses Fairhaven and then pours right into her driveway and pools next to her property. Something that also took place afterwards, I believe it was Mr. Kelling said something about water runoff and the Costco. Costco actually took approximately, I'm guessing, a 4-inch, perhaps it was a 6-inch, I didn't measure it. They had a water line and a pump where they took the storm water that had pooled near their development and they pumped it over into the Jersey Meadows Reservoir, which comes down Lorton Avenue. And just that small amount of water being put in that location caused water to run across Lorton Avenue for an extended period of time. Which basically illustrates that there are major problems in the area due to how that storm water is run off currently, and perhaps it cannot sustain even a protected or a slow release from a new development. I addressed previously that my wife and I walk our dog along Lorton. There are no sidewalks. There's very few lights, and to be quite honest with you, except for the condition of the streets and the runoff issues, what I did find when I met my fellow residents was we like it that way. We like the peace and quiet. We like to be a little bit secluded from the rest of the community. We like it being kind of an old school country road. The feel of what you get when you go back in time, before you had everything cemented and everybody had sidewalks and curbs and gutters and storm sewers. Yes, it's an open ditch. Yes, they do need to be maintained and perhaps taken care of. But looking at what I'm proposing on this petition and what many of my neighbors also agreed with, if we restrict the flow of traffic on Lorton, we're not looking at major re-engineering and major tax dollars if we can close it off and restrict our access. That may not come from a gate or speed bumps or anything other than putting some signs up saying emergency services and school bus traffic only. Personal vehicles restricted. It's very simple. But we would like you to explore all of these different things as you look at the development and the impact to our neighborhoods and our properties, and also take the time to think about the long-term plan and how it's going to affect the communities, not only ours, but the people traveling east and west, so we can keep our community safe for everyone, including those who like to walk their dog along Lorton and enjoy the scenery. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next.
Patricia Brunner, 4840 Fairhaven Court. Just a few things that my neighbors have also mentioned. One question I have to the city. So what happens when the ordinance is upheld by the development? What does the city do when the residents still have an issue? So I think what you're hearing is we try not to complain. We like our area, but do we have any confidence that the city will help us out if this all goes through? Second, I have an issue with some of the presentation given earlier by Ryan. I would appreciate some of the assumptions that were used, especially around the wording that it would not change our home values, especially when the city directly, that means how much tax revenue the city gets from our residential homes. Like, of course, it's in your favor to say that they don't change. When we go to sell our property, that will be the real test. So I'd really appreciate in the future some assumptions around how you guys develop your presentations. I also have concerns about, in general, the thought process on the amount of revenue Portillo's will generate. I stopped by Portillo's in Peoria on June 30th at 11:30 a.m. There was one person in the drive-thru. One person on a Saturday. So is this business, I mean, there's a lot of excitement, but the business is only 2 months old in Peoria, and there was one person in the drive-thru. It was shocking to me. I assumed Portillo's would attract a lot more people. Also would like to comment on the Facebook page around Bring Portillo's to the Quad Cities. There's 12 comments on their page about tonight's meeting. 3 of them specifically said, why would you put this restaurant on 53rd? And none of them were from my neighbors. So just in general, when you talk to people in Davenport, the general comment is, why would you put this on 53rd? That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Greg Greenwood. I live at 2719 West 34th Street. But I did grow up on the east side since '82, so have lots of friends and very aware of the neighborhood of that area. I am definitely for Portillo's. I would also like to state that it's more of a destination. You go to different cities and you're aware of places. I mean, they're going to come into the casino. They're going to come in to see shows and concerts, and they're going to want to go to Portillo's. So it's definitely a draw. One other thing is they have probably the best drive-through, best fast service I've ever seen. I first went to Portillo's in '93 up in Chicago, and you think Chick-fil-A is good, and they're way better than that as far as service, as quickness of service. I do want to say the unofficial Facebook page, they do have about 15,000 followers, so there's definitely people in Davenport that are very interested, compared to only 4,800 for Frank's and Silvis. So we're talking 15,000 versus 48. Happy Joe's, been around forever, 56,000. The Machine Shed, only 25,000. So we're having 15,000 in a short period of time that are very interested in having this restaurant here. And keep in mind, Portillo's has 800,000 followers on Facebook. So it is a huge draw to the community. Now, after hearing a lot of the things, I am very concerned about the drainage. You know, I think there should be some address, you know, a further onlook of that. Keep in mind the people behind me, even if they don't come up to speak, at least half the people behind us are for Portillo's. If you saw, only maybe about half of them did stand up. Conclusion, speak for my friends and family, coworkers that may not make it tonight. They all look forward to having Portillo's in their hometown. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Joe Amato. I'm not a Davenport resident. I was my first year here after retiring from the military, but I do work here. Last 5 years, I'm here 5 days a week, eating, shopping, working. So I spend all my time here. Saw the Facebook page. That's how I became aware of, actually the QC Times was how I became aware of it. From Chicago area, very excited. Came here to speak in support of Portillo's. I'll just leave it at that, just for equal time. I mean, I know the Bettendorf lawyer took a show of hands to show who was opposed. We never did see who was here in favor. Yeah, just keep things even. So excited about it, wanted to speak in support of it. It's really the beef sandwiches, not the hot dogs. We don't have good beef sandwiches here. You don't really know what you're missing. So, given that, the rest of my few minutes, I'd just like to talk about this shouldn't be between winners and losers. I mean, obviously, you know, my personal dining preferences is a very small thing compared to the concerns of the residents that are going to be living with this every day for the rest of their lives. And it sounds like they have an awful lot of concerns, significant concerns. I very much respect property rights. I don't think the residents really have a right to deny what happens in adjacent property that has been purchased by somebody else, if it's going to be purchased by somebody else. But they do have a right to have their own property not adversely impacted. But from everything that I've heard tonight, and it's all news to me, I've just been listening all night, it sounds like the residents have significant problems already with traffic and specifically drainage. Now, 53rd is a nightmare all the way down to Eastern and beyond. Anyone trying to make a left-hand turn, you know, traveling on 53rd is going to be stuck in a long line waiting for that one person that wants to try to make a left turn off 53rd. I try to avoid 53rd as much as I can. I do it for Portillo's, but the fact is there are problems there. I mean, the traffic flow isn't good. And I'm not here to blame Davenport. Like you said, this was a previously unincorporated area that Davenport inherited. But Davenport also inherited the property taxes that come with that neighborhood. And it sounds like the citizens have significant concerns already. Their current situation needs to be addressed. Portillo's will bring in more tax revenues, but there's already the tax revenues of the residents, and it doesn't seem like that's being reinvested in their neighborhood. Whether or not Portillo's gets approved or not, I mean, a vote against Portillo's right now does not do anything to fix the situation of the current residents. They already have water problems. They already have traffic problems. Portillo's is the only thing bringing attention to this. And it seems like it would be a shame if we did not get the good of a Portillo's for lack of the city taking care of the surrounding area, which, like I said, I mean, like you said, previously unincorporated, Davenport inherited it. It wasn't built to Davenport codes, but now it's Davenport's. And if we want to improve Davenport and bring good things into Davenport, then we kind of have to take care of these legacy problems first. I mean, if we just vote against Portillo's and everyone goes home, then everyone still goes back home to their existing water problems, and that would be a lose-lose for everyone. What we need to do is take care of the concerns of the residents who are paying taxes and don't seem to be getting a return on those taxes, so that their situation is alleviated, so that the addition of Portillo's and Costco, which also thank you very much for bringing Costco here, greatly appreciate that, so that the region can accommodate the water, the storm drainage that both existing and envisioned. With some effort on the part of the city, we can make everyone happy as opposed to just saying no and just going back to the way things are, which doesn't seem to be acceptable to anyone at this point. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next.
Tom Pasternak, attorney for the developer. Needless to say, we are just proud and passionate about this development, and we appreciate the conversation that has gone on with regard to the nature of the development. But quite candidly, we've got the cart before the horse. These objections that are being lodged are all fine, and they need discussion, but the real critical question is the land use for this property. We're talking about rezoning today. And when we talk about rezoning, we're asking whether that property should be commercial. That is our request. We understand that it's residential now, but our development obviously contemplates that it should be commercial. And now we ask your opinion as to that issue. Now, I think we've all taken a look at the comprehensive plan. And the way in which we've interpreted the comprehensive plan is that this development is not a big box. It's 4 separate retailers or a restaurant. So it is not as large as the Costco is going to be, is conducive to the 2035 plan. If in fact you agree with that kind of concept, then rezoning is proper. Furthermore, if you don't agree with that interpretation, the question is then, has there been a change in the land use in this property that justifies that it be commercial? And simply, once again, when you go through this, in 2016, when that plan was approved, that interchange at 53rd and 74 was just being done. My God, it's monstrous. You take a look at the lanes, you now know that Costco's going in, you now know that there's going to be another car dealership to the east, you're going to have 5 lanes, signalization. If that property were vacant, if it were a farm, would any of you have any problems whatsoever in making it commercial based on the current conditions of the property that you see it now? Our argument is whether you look at the 2035 comp plan and say that it matches the comprehensive plan proposal, or whether you say that it's inconsistent with that and you see the change in land use, that property deserves to be commercial. Now, as far as the objectors' concerns on stormwater and traffic, we're not belittling them. That's why we're having this conversation. But we're also coming forward as PDD, which means that we will be here with the neighbors once again when that property develops. Every site plan, including Portillo's, is going to require us to come forward to both you and to council as well as staff to make sure just what is done properly. They will voice their objections. Once the property is zoned, we can have our experts take a look at what needs to be done, how it needs to be done, how it needs to be evaluated. City staff will have the opportunity. Some people have talked about, well, you don't know anything about how Costco will be. Well, I guarantee you this property is not going to develop as fast as Costco. So we're going to know just exactly what's happening at Costco in terms of a water runoff. And these issues are going to be there at the time we come forward for site plan approval and development. The neighbors will have the opportunity to discuss it then. We'll be here. We're not selling it off because we've got to develop it first. We'll go with them every neck of the way to figure out how this venture is going to be done so that we are the good neighbors. And that does justify the fact that this property should be commercial, which is the essence of the issue today. We are rezoning the property, not developing the property today. That's what you're here to talk about. And as far as the misnomers on the traffic study, well, are any of us traffic engineers, traffic study engineers? I have one, and so I'm going to let him talk now as to why some of the allegations or suppositions that have been said are not necessarily true. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm David Wright with Traffic Impact Group. I just wanted to address the contention that we can't know what the traffic volumes are going to be from these developments. There's an organization called the Institute of Transportation Engineers, and they have a publication called Trip Generation Studies, which began back in the 1980s. So they have 30 to 40 years of statistical data on traffic development, on traffic volumes from various types of development, hundreds of different categories. As an example, we utilize the ITE Trip Generation manual to develop the traffic numbers which we used in the study. We were sent specific counts that Portillo's had done at 4 or 5 locations in the Chicago area. And the numbers that we were using from the ITE Trip Generation studies were within a percentage point of the numbers that we were provided from Portillo's. So statistical analysis is a real thing, and it can be very accurate in terms of the volume of traffic that will be coming out of these developments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Adam Bruner, 4840 Fairhaven. If I can just ask for one clarification from the traffic study. Did you just say that you only use Portillo's impact on your traffic analysis?
No,
and
I didn't just
within 1% numbers of Portillo's impacted the facility?
No, I didn't say that.
What
I'm saying is
We need
the traffic volumes for Portillo's in the study, which is just one little piece of this, matches the numbers that Portillo's provided us that their restaurant would be contributing to the overall development. But we used all of the development, including the Costco, in our analysis.
Where did the numbers from the Costco input come? Where
From
did
the
you,
ITE Trip Generations.
from Costco stores themselves or from other type of establishments
From the
similar?
ITE Trip Generations.
Was it a categorized input or was it okay?
It is categorized.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any final statements?
One short and final statement, Mr. Chairman. Michael Malloy, attorney for the residents. Again, we are not opposed to Portillo's coming to Davenport, Iowa. This is the wrong location for Portillo's, folks. I heard their attorney tell you that this property deserves to be rezoned. I disagree with that. The property is zoned R1. They've got the burden of proof to show you a compelling reason why it should be rezoned. Again, I request that you table this matter. Thank you.
And we will no longer entertain rebuttals. You had your opportunity to make your statement, and that's where it'll be. Anybody have any new commentary? Commissioners, do we have any additional questions? Roll call, please.
Connell.
Yes.
Hepner.
No.
Johnson.
Yes.
Kelling.
No.
Lammers.
No.
Med.
Yes.
Quinn.
Yes.
Reinhardt.
No.
Tallman, yes. 5-4, motion carries, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Tallman. We will now move on to case number CP 18-02. Commissioner Tallman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This
Hold
is
on,
the,
can
this
we
is
hold on for a second till those who are exiting exit quietly? Commissioner Tomlin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, this is the last case under zoning activity. It's case number CP 18-02, request of the City of Davenport to amend the Davenport 2035 future land use designation from RG Residential General to Commercial Corridor on 6.5 acres, more or less, located along the south of East 53rd Street and east of Lorton Avenue. Staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission accept the listed findings and forward case number CP 18-02 to the City Council with a recommendation for approval, and I so move.
Second.
Case number CP 18-02 has been moved and seconded for discussion. Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ryan Rusnak. Again, as we looked at this project, the scale of the development we felt was compatible with the residential general of the 2035 land use plan. Again, here's the existing language with the underlined for emphasis. But what we felt overall, looking at it from a long-range perspective, again, you have the Costco development on East 53rd. You have the car dealership that's going through at 53rd and Eastern. You have the signalized intersection at the Costco north of this project, as well as the design improvements to East 53rd. Really, from a perspective of looking at a land use map, as well as really how the corridor has been changing over the last years. We felt that for a long-range plan, that commercial corridor would be a better fit. And again, we're not looking at it from a broad-based perspective of painting the entire corridor. We think it's appropriate to kind of look at these as they come on one by one. And so we really kind of, through this process, took a step back and staff initiated this request. Here are our findings, which are similar to what I discussed. And staff recommends this commission forward case CP 1802 with the City Council for a recommendation for approval. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ryan. Any questions from commissioners? Seeing none, roll call, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Would anybody in the audience like to speak in favor or opposition of this petition? Seeing none, roll call, please. Thank you.
Hepner.
No.
Johnson.
Yes.
Kelling.
No.
Lammers.
No.
Med.
Yes.
Quinn.
Yes.
Reinhardt.
No.
Tallman, yes. And Connell.
Yes.
5-4, that motion carries. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Commissioner Tallman. We'll move on to subdivision activity. Commissioner Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two cases tonight. The first one is case number ROW 18-01, request of William Torsia on behalf of WCT Investments, Davenport Series LLC, for the vacation abandonment of 0.34 acre, 14,812 square feet MOL of right-of-way known as Fairhaven Road, extending approximately 285 feet south from East 53rd Street to facilitate commercial development. Staff recommends that the Plan and Zone Commission accept the listed findings and forward case number ROW 18-01 to the City Council with a recommendation for approval subject to the three listed conditions, and I so move.
Second.
Case number case number ROW 18-01 has been moved and seconded for discussion. Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All the pretty much the testimony really occurred with the rezoning, and so I won't, for the sake of time, repeat all of it, but just note that it's incorporated into the staff report that staff has provided. But this is a companion request with the rezoning. So staff did recommend approval, subject to the 3 conditions: that the rezoning be approved, that a utility easement be provided, because there are existing utilities within the Fairhaven Road right-of-way, and that turnaround be dedicated to the city in the form of public right-of-way, and that would be accomplished during the platting process. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ryan. Commissioners have any questions? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Johnson?
Yes.
Kelly?
No.
Lammers?
No.
Med?
Yes.
Quinn?
Yes.
Reinertz?
No.
Tolman, yes. Connell?
Yes.
Hepner?
No.
5-4, that motion carries.
Thank you.
My second case tonight and last one is case number F18-08, request of Ted Johnson on behalf of Costco Real Estate for a final plat of Costco Addition, being a one-lot subdivision on 17.33 acres MOL, located at 2790 and 2784 East 53rd Street. Staff recommends the City Plan and Zone Commission accept the listed findings and forward case number F18-08 to the City Council with a recommendation for approval subject to the 4 listed conditions, and I so move.
Case number F18-08's been moved and seconded for discussion. Ryan?
I hope you're not disappointed I'm not doing a presentation, but this is just to formalize the Costco subdivision. So this is just one lot subdivision to really formalize how the property is being subdivided. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Kelling?
Yes.
Lammers?
Yes.
Med?
Yes.
Quinn?
Yes.
Reinertz?
Yes.
Tolman, yes. Connell?
Yes.
Hepner?
Yes.
And Johnson?
Yes.
Motion carries.
That concludes my presentation, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Connell. It appears as though we have 3 future business items to look forward to in our next public hearing, which will be July 17th. Anybody in the audience care to speak at this time for items not on our agenda? Seeing none? Any additional communications from staff? Thank you, Ryan.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor of adjournment signify by aye. Opposed? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Please drive home safely.